Bun găsit! Înainte să vă prezint invitatul ediției de astăzi, vă rețin un minut pentru o rubrică nouă, Neurochange. Uite un pont. Dacă ai decis să faci o schimbare în viața ta, nu îți propune schimbări uriașe care ți se par irealizabile. Una dintre modalitățile prin care poți aduce schimbarea mai aproape este să minimizezi investiția. Adică să nu îți propui să mergi zilnic la sală, ci să începi prin a-ți propune să faci 10 minute zilnic de mișcare și să mergi mai mult pe jos. Adică gândește-te la victorii mici, la jaloane mici. Ține minte că orice schimbare în viața ta e posibilă și începe cu tine. Ca să produci o schimbare, trebuie să știi exact ce vrei să obții, indiferent despre ce arie a vieții am vorbit. Ce blochează schimbarea? Nu este suficient să spui vreau schimbare, fără să știi cu ce înlocuiești o situație, un obicei sau o atitudine. Iar lipsa viziunii te va conduce la opoziție și la eșec. Deci, planifică mutările cruciale, află care îți este destinația, apelează la forța grupului. Ce înseamnă asta? Ia-ți un terapeut, un coach, un trainer, un antrenor, chiar și un prieten care să aibă același scop ca tine. Antrenorul știe drumul, iar prietenul care are același obiectiv te va încuraja în zilele în care ți-ai pierdut motivația și încrederea în reușită. Încă ceva. Ca să fii convins că nu reușești să implementezi un obicei nou, perseverează cel puțin 21 de zile. Hai să vezi apoi diferența.
The mind is not the enemy. It's the disconnect between the mind and the body. When we're disconnected from the body, when we're not connected to what we're feeling, we don't see that I cannot is actually an experience of tension or fear or constriction within the body. And people think that it's somewhere out there. They don't quite understand where it is. It's quite easy. The body is the subconscious mind. We all make intentions for change. I think the first step to moving away from behaviors or choices that no longer serve us is realizing that the mind is not the boss. 95 to 90% of our behavioral choices are coming from things outside of our mind. I thought I could change, I thought it was easy, but we're disconnected from what's actually driving the behavior, so then we immediately go back to the behavior as soon as we're stressed. Why am I doing this is the most powerful question you can ask for anyone moving away from any behavior, any substance. It's not a destination. We're not going to health because it's that destination that's going to happen at some point. It's a constantly changing process.
So taking care of myself, taking care of my body, my mind, my spirit,
Yes.
my emotions, my disease, my everything will make me a more relational person.
If there's stress and tension in my relationships, I'm not taking care of myself. Self-care is about giving the best of you, not what's left of you.
Bună ziua, doamnelor și domnilor! Bine ați revenit la un nou sezon al emisiunii de dezvoltare relațională Eu Pot. Astăzi avem un invitat de seamă venit de peste mări și țări, tocmai din Noua Zeelandă, să își lanseze ultima carte, Somawise, o carte despre cum să ne conectăm trupul și corpul, cum să ne ieșim din propriile gânduri, să ne înțelegem mai bine semnalele pe care ni le transmite corpul, să înțelegem care sunt emoțiile din spatele bolilor. Dr. Luke Sniewski, welcome here in our studio. Okay, I will start with this first question because we are here in the show called Eu Pot, I Can. Mm-hmm. Why is it more at hand for people to say I cannot, I cannot be, I cannot transform myself, I cannot have? And behind this affirmation of I cannot, even if it's said out loud or only in one's head, lays a whole system a whole system of explanations to excuse our lack of power to transform our lives into I can.
This is it's almost a beautiful introduction into Somawise, because what you're describing is the process that the mind goes through once it goes to the I can't or I cannot. So here comes all the thoughts that create that conclusion, that make it real, make it true. When we're disconnected from the body, when we're not connected to what we're feeling, we don't see that I cannot is actually an experience of tension or fear or constriction within the body. And if we're not paying attention to that, then we simply believe the thought, we believe the story in our mind, and we can continue believing that story. I'm sure during the conversation today we'll be talking about where that story comes from. But what you're describing is from here down, there's an experience that's also happening that is triggering the mind to say, I can't, but we're not paying attention to that.
So this book, Somawise, makes me think of the wisdom of the body. So what does our body wants to transmit? And what does Somawise bring new as technique?
So one of the things that people often describe as making decisions is the subconscious mind. We talk about the subconscious mind being responsible for 95 to 99% of our behavioral choices, our actions, the way we engage with the world. But where's the subconscious mind? People think that it's somewhere out there. They don't quite understand where it is. It's quite easy. The body is the subconscious mind. So all 5 of our senses, what we see, what we hear, what we touch, what we smell, what we feel, all of that input from the environment is actually information and is being processed. And then at the end of that processing is a single thought. This is the mind's best guess as to what's happening. But if we're connected to the body and we start feeling these different sensations, we start getting in touch with the subconscious mind. So rather than, let me give you an example. Someone that might have an expression of anger, and they think that that anger is just coming out uncontrollably because of some thought. When we are connected to the body, we might be able to pick up on the sensations that we feel. So, oh, if I practice being connected to myself, oh, I know this tension, I know this constriction, I know this heat, I know that I start sweating, whatever it may happen, all of a sudden we're able to see the experience before it becomes too much. So here's the wisdom of the body. The wisdom of the body is telling us that something important has happened, and if we don't pay attention to it, what might happen is saying things that we have to apologize for later on, or doing things and actions and reactions that we feel guilty or shameful about because they're not in line with who we want to be, right? We all make intentions for change. I want to do this. I want to lose weight. I want to move away from this addiction. I want to have more harmony in my relationships. I want to have a better relationship with my children or my spouse. And all of a sudden, these intentions, these words are overloaded because the subconscious mind, the nervous system programming, the impulses from the body is much stronger than the thought that says, I want to change. That's only 1 to 5%. The body is the other 95 to 99%.
I know that the most difficult addictions that we can get rid of are the ones related to the body. So the smoke addiction, the alcohol, the food, the sweets, the sugar, whatever addiction can, and even the addiction of laziness.
Yes.
To start doing some movements and some sports. Why is it so difficult for the mind, which has been considered the boss of our being for all these centuries, why is it so difficult for the boss to convince the body, who should obey, right, to get out of that addiction?
I think it starts with that, what you've just said, the mind thinking it's the boss. I think the first step to moving away from behaviors or choices that no longer serve us is realizing that the mind is not the boss. The mind thinks it's the boss, but when it recognizes that, again, 95 to 90% of our behavioral choices are coming from things outside of our mind. It's coming from nervous system programming. It's coming from the interactions of our body with the environment. When we are able to take a step back and say, actually, maybe I'm not as strong as my mind thinks I am in relation to this change. When we take that posture, it allows us to take a step back and go at it from a very different, more humble way. So it makes us more curious about what's going on. Another reason why it's hard to change is because imagine that you set an intention, you set a goal, and then almost immediately, what happens? You fall back into the old habit because, well, I thought I could change. I thought it was easy, but we're disconnected from what's actually driving the behavior. So then we immediately go back to the behavior as soon as we're stressed, as soon as we're triggered, as soon as something happens that makes us go back to the old way.
From the exterior.
Exactly. We're going back to our old behavior. And so what this does is actually programs, because what happens when you go back to the old behavior? You judge yourself. You shame yourself, you feel guilty. Oh, here we go again. And you start programming this into the nervous system.
I cannot do it.
Yes, the
I'm a loser.
expectation. Yes. And so here comes the judgments and the experiences of shame and guilt that simply perpetuate this cycle. because we are only looking at it from what's happening in the mind instead of taking a step back. Well, what's happening in my body that's making this process continue?
We have the brain in our head, the brain in our heart, and the brain in our guts. Why did the scientists let them aside for so many centuries? Why do we find out about this only in the past 10, 15 years?
Well, the traditions of this are very old. In Eastern philosophies, the practice of meditation was used to connect to the body. But I think there's a resurgence of this because I think people are tired of not changing. I think that people are seeing that no matter how many theories we create, no matter how many concepts are released, no matter how many mind-based attempts at change that we've created, it's not creating the authentic change that people are actually yearning for, that they want. We all know it's possible, otherwise we wouldn't do it. So we all crave it, seek it, yearn for it, and yet it's always seemingly just out of grasp. So this is a way of coming back and saying, you know what? Maybe my mind doesn't have all the answers. Maybe there's something more that I'm not considering. And I think that process of questioning the authority of the mind is a very important first step to becoming, again, a servant, a humble servant of the body. So I think the mind-obsessed world that we live in, everyone wants to be master of their mind, and it's all about mastery of the mind. For me, I've taken a very different approach. I'm a humble servant to my body's needs. And here's the interesting thing. When the body is cared for, nurtured, taken care of, the mind is less chaotic, the mind is more focused, the mind is more concentrated, which actually allows us to be masters of our mind simply by taking care of our body. It unlocks our creativity, our potential to focus, our potential to be present with the person that we're sitting with rather than being lost in our thoughts.
So basically you're telling me that is the other way around.
Yes.
We should take care of our body, of our spirit, to get to put in order our mind and emotions. What you were saying earlier, we need to take care of our body to give it real food,
Yes.
to give it real movement, the relaxation, the meditation. Let's focus a little bit on this. What does real food mean?
So it's food that hasn't been manufactured, as close to its natural state as possible. And in fact, real food, movement, and rest and recovery, those are the three big rocks of a healthy lifestyle. Those are the first three most important things that create or begin creating an environment that puts our body in an environment of health and healing. Because the body will naturally, you don't have to do anything. That's the mind does not like giving up control or thinking that it doesn't know best. And yet the mind doesn't have to do anything if you eat real food as close to nature as possible. If you move every day, because the body needs circulation to heal and thrive. In fact, every single metabolic process in the human body requires circulation. So when we're moving and walking, we're supporting that circulatory process. When we're sitting at a desk all day, we are not supporting that circulatory process. And then sleep, to understand and value that our body needs time to rest and recover. If you do those three things and we put our body in that environment, we don't have to do anything. The body naturally moves towards health and healing. Every one of your cells, trillions of cells in the body, every single one of them is programmed. There's an innate intelligence in every cell that is moving towards healing and thriving. The mind is this single thought that thinks it controls everything, and yet there's an innate intelligence in the body that's naturally going there. If you don't stop it by putting it in an environment with junk food, overworking, not sleeping, not moving, then we're stopping that process.
What I understand out of this is that the body wants to be healthy,
Yes.
but the mind gets in the way.
Yes. Yes, the mind is actually getting in the way of that process. Again,
And our own mind is leading us towards illness, disease, and so on.
I would say it's not the mind, it's because the mind is not the enemy. It's the disconnect between the mind and the body. So the mind doesn't understand that the body is sending signals. The body is saying, hey, I'm stressed. Hey, I'm overwhelmed. Hey, something needs to change. But the mind can't feel it. The mind is disconnected. We're disconnected from the neck down, and the mind's scrambling to figure out what's going on here. So it starts trying to figure out and fix the external environment to try to fix the problem. Imagine this. Imagine there was smoke in front of your eyes. And so we fan away the smoke because we think the mind's, oh, there's smoke here, so I have to get rid of it. So I'm going to follow this thought that I have to get rid of the smoke in front of my eyes. And what happens when we get rid of the smoke in front of our eyes? More smoke appears. It's not until we look down and we see that our body's on fire. Oh, this is the source of the smoke in front of me. So why don't I tend to this flaming body first and see if there's any smoke left over that's actually blurring the way that I'm seeing the world.
A person who is 50, for example,
Yes.
is watching our show in this moment,
Yes.
will say, what does this even mean to connect with my body? I've been living in this body. I am this body.
Yes.
I'm alive, I'm breathing, I'm sleeping, I'm eating, I'm doing everything you're saying. What does it even mean to be connected mind-body?
It means to pay attention to the sensations, in other words, what we feel on the body from moment to moment. So I would say that the human experience at any given moment, it's like a coin. And on one side of that coin is our thought about what's happening in the world. And that's what we're paying attention to because it's easier. It's what we've been conditioned to do because of trauma, because of conditioning, whatever it may be. And we're paying attention to the thoughts. At any given moment, all you have to do is flip the coin around and realize something is also happening in the body. And that's a very important process to say, okay, if my mind is having these thoughts of anxiety, of fear, of whatever it may be, here comes the thoughts. At that moment, the safest, easiest way to do it, maybe it's not so easy. I'm saying it's easy, but it can be quite challenging for some, is to pause and say, okay, if my mind is thinking this habitual pattern, I wonder what's happening in my body to make this experience of spiraling thoughts continue. And that's where we take our attention on the body and we might begin to notice something. And for someone that is disconnected, which is the majority of people, because we've been conditioned to disconnect from the body. So it may take some time to become sensitive to this, to become sensitive to, okay, here's my chaotic mind. Okay, is something happening? Oh, I've noticed a tension here or a constriction here. I wonder what happens if I just focus on my body and let my body relax. My body will naturally move towards that healing. What will happen to the state of the mind? And people may wonder, what is sensation? What is sensation? Everyone's like, what do you mean? What am I looking for? It's just feeling the body. It's that simple. And as an example, I'm gonna do that. Can you do an exercise with me?
Of course.
So I just want you to take your finger and I want you to touch the top of your lip, and you can close your eyes actually. If you want to close your eyes, it makes it easier. And now remove your finger and notice that you can still feel exactly where you touched. You can still feel the residue. Is that true?
True.
Exactly. So that is sensation. It's nothing more than, oh, I can feel something there. Every single part of our body, from head to toe, has sensation at any given moment. It's just that we're not paying attention to. And these sensations are actually at the very foundation of what we're reacting to in the world.
You wrote like this: in the body we can find stored all the lessons of our past.
Yes.
At the same time, we can find inside our body all the answers to all our quests.
Yes,
What
isn't
does
that?
this mean?
In other words, the conditioning of our nervous system, all the ways that our body reacts, that was put into our nervous system as children. Some would argue that it was done through family history. Some would argue that it's cultural, that it goes back hundreds, whatever we decide that is the appropriate time that our nervous system was programmed, it didn't happen today. It happened a long time ago. And that was the foundation for how we react and engage with the world. If we begin to come into contact and feel that reaction, so here comes the reaction. If we meet that reaction with stillness, 2 chapters in the book talk about stillness, which is the most important quality for creating change.
Let's talk about the stillness.
Okay. I use stillness rather than meditation very intentionally because I think that meditation is full of definitions and jargon and dogma, religious dogma, sometimes spiritual dogma. So I've chosen to put that aside and just focus on the quality of stillness. The reason I do that is stillness is the opposite of reactivity. And reactivity is at the core of all suffering. Every one of our habits that we want to change, every one of the relationships that we'd like to fix, every one of our health, holistic health or well-being intentions that we want to meet, it's because we react that we don't move towards that change. Because again, the mind has intentions, but then here comes stress and our nervous system reacts, and then we just go for what we've been programmed to do. So stillness is the opposite of that. This is what makes, to me, why it's so powerful, because instead of reacting, we train, we practice. In fact, practice is a better word. We practice feeling the experience and not doing anything about it. Because if we are able to feel something and notice discomfort, there it is, there's my impulse. As soon as we close our eyes, anyone who says they're not addicted, I challenge them to this. Close your eyes for 10 minutes and see what happens. Your mind will maybe go to work, maybe it will go to chores, whatever you're addicted to, that'll pop up. That's the conditioning coming up. And if we practice being still, can I see this? Can I notice this experience? No matter how uncomfortable, if it's boring, if it's anxious, if it's uncomfortable, if it's whatever it may be, every excuse, the mind will come up with every excuse to move. No, this is not for me, I need to go. The mind will come up with every possible argument
I don't have time is the most
I don't have time. But this is, I'm just asking for 5 minutes just to demonstrate this, right? So just 5 minutes of being completely still. And what you'll notice is that something is happening. That's experience, something's happening. And if you practice,
I've seen people going into anxiety attacks for trying to be still.
Yes.
Why does this happen?
Because when we become still, we turn around and face everything we've been avoiding. So here comes this natural way of being where we're constantly reacting, we're living in the mind, and we're going through our routines, we're constantly doing things, and all of a sudden we stop. And after you stop, you begin to feel all of the energy, all of the experience, everything that we've been trying to push down and hide, everything we've been trying to avoid, here it comes to the surface. And that is not a comfortable experience. Coming back to the body is not peace, harmony, butterflies, sunshine, and rainbows. Coming back to yourself, coming back to the body is not a comfortable process.
So healing means also pain. We have to be aware from the beginning of it.
I will say that pain and discomfort are part of the journey until the mind realizes that it's just sensation. But the mind will label it as pain. The mind will label bored, like even boredom is pain. It's painful to be bored, so we move away from it. Imagine this situation. We're trying to change our diet, lose weight, health, whatever it may be. All of a sudden, here comes the craving to go for candy or wine or whatever it may be. And we notice it. Well, I've been practicing stillness, a few minutes a day, whatever it may be, and all of a sudden I'm paying attention more to my body. And then right before you're about to reach, you realize, oh my gosh, there it is. There's the craving. The craving is in my body. It's not automatic anymore. And in that moment of pause, in that moment of stillness, that is the most powerful moment of change that is available to us, because then we can choose. Because now all of a sudden the unconscious behavior has become conscious, and then the mind can say, maybe I will, maybe I won't. Most of the time it'll still do it, because again, it shows and respects and honors how strong these impulses are. The process of change is slow, it's patient, it's gradual, but it starts with paying attention to that impulse to move towards reactivity.
Can you please give this lovely present to the people who are watching us in this moment? A very easy technique. Yes. When you are facing your craving, yes, what to do, not to reach for that cake, not to lit that cigarette, not to drink that glass.
I'll say 2 steps. The first step is truly and completely to pause and pay attention to the body. Something is happening there, and see if you can find it. Make it a game. Make it something that you can become playful and curious about. What is happening in my body in this moment that's making me reach for that? And then stay. And in that process of staying and pausing, this is where powerful reflections can happen. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this is the most powerful question you can ask for anyone moving away from any behavior, any substance. Because when we ask ourselves, why am I reaching for this in this particular moment, we can start to understand the context and the needs that this is fulfilling. We might have an addiction that the reason we're moving there is because I'm stressed, and it's actually helping me move away from something that's uncomfortable. So if we're armed and we know this, okay, well, are there different ways that I might relieve my stress? Once you know that, okay, this is actually just my stress reducer. I also know that when I exercise, I feel better. When I go for a walk, I feel better. When I have a hot bath, or when I get a massage, when I stretch, when I do a sauna, all of a sudden, well, actually, I can relieve stress in all these different ways, because now we're not focusing on the behavior and judging the behavior or judging ourselves for the behavior. Instead, what we're focusing on is, what did this actually fulfill for me? What need did it fulfill? And now I can hopefully, possibly, reflect, well, I've got these other things that I can choose. Let's try one of those and see how I feel afterwards. And in that single moment, we've changed our destiny because we've paid attention, we've become still, we've noticed the craving, the temptation to move, and we've chosen a different path. I think we talked about, you've mentioned spirituality, and in many Eastern traditions, there's this goal of enlightenment. For me, enlightenment happens in a moment. Every moment that we pause and we choose something different than our programmed, automatic, conditioned reaction, that is a moment of enlightenment.
So every little victory
Yes.
of the body over the mind,
Yes.
of changing step by step some damaging habits,
Yes.
that is enlightenment. So
Yes.
we can live it every day.
Every moment, because it's not a destination. We're not going to health because it's that destination that's going to happen at some point. It's a constantly changing process. Every moment we're moving in one direction or the other. It's flowing. It's never stopping.
This is a great approach, not thinking that change and the good life will come at some point further away. It can start now.
Yes, in fact, it's the only place that it can happen. Authentic change, I call them precious little moments. In the book, I talk about precious little moments of change. It is literally that moment where no one is watching, no one's paying attention, and you've just opened the pantry, right? And you're about to reach for something. No one's gonna know that you ate that thing. And you know what? Just this one time right now, I'm not. And I'm gonna do something else, and I'm gonna pay attention. And in that moment, you've changed. That is the only change, that is the only moment change is possible. In fact, I talk about this in the book as well. Every other form of change is not real because it's in your mind. So the only moment that change is possible is when we're stressed, when we're triggered, when you're craving. In that moment where here comes the programming, the agitation, I need to go do this, that is the only moment change is possible. Otherwise, it's just talk.
It's just a thought.
It's just talking or a thought. Exactly. I'm gonna plan my best workout. I'm gonna plan my diet. Okay, I'm ready. That's not change yet.
Okay, so until we don't imprint in our body
Yes.
the sensation and the experience, it is not called change, it is called just plan.
It's just a plan. Until life says, here comes the experience, here comes the stress, let's see how you react. The stress comes, the body wants to react, the old programming says, I'm going to reach for the behavior or the addiction or the substance or whatever it is. And then in that moment you say, I'm gonna become still. I'm going to stay with my body and give my body a chance to process this. This is why so many people, even mind-based philosophies talk about focusing on your breath. The reason...
Or the word stop.
Stop, even stop. Stop is a beautiful acronym. Surrender to your own presence. Stop. Surrender to own presence. Just become present. And the reason we focus on our breath as a way to become present is you cannot breathe in the past. You cannot breathe in the future. The only time you can breathe is now. This is why it's such a powerful tool. It's not a gimmick. It's quite simple. If you're breathing and you focus on your breath, all of a sudden we're focusing on the present moment. The second reason focusing on the breath is very useful is what breathes? Is your mind breathing or is your body breathing? Your body. So as soon as we focus on our breath, where are we focusing? Our body. So it does two things. It gets us present and it begins the process of reconnecting and feeling what's happening in our body. So the breath is a powerful tool for us.
Can we understand what kind of sufferance, emotional sufferance we have based on the organ on the body or the part of the body that we can feel the disease or the illness?
Well, here's the interesting bit. The whole body, every time we do any lifestyle choice that creates stress or inflammation or some kind of damage to the body, every single human body absorbs it in a similar way. In other words, the whole body is processing and holding that stress. If I took a hammer and I hit my finger isn't the only part of my body that's experiencing that injury. That inflammation is being circulated throughout my body. In fact, that's a beautiful survival mechanism because in order for
Including the brain.
Yes, the whole body. There's no part of the body that isn't impacted by hitting a hammer to my finger. So if we realize this, every single body is now collecting, absorbing, processing stress in a very different way. All of a sudden, this human body might have a leak of that excess stress and it'll show up as a mental health challenge, depression. This human body might have a leak in all of that excess stress and it shows up as a gut issue. So every single person, their physiological system will absorb the stress, but then when it starts having leaks and it becomes too much for the body to hold, the symptoms and the diseases that arise, that's going to be different based on every single person.
So you cannot say that he is very angry, for example, and his liver is going to suffer, or he is suffering for love, so he has a heart condition, so on.
Well, you might say that it might be an interesting starting point for inquiry and reflection. So for me, if it's a horoscope, if it's whatever it may be, right? Because there's so many different ways of explaining what's happening to us. For me, they all have some semblance, some fraction, some grain of truth that might be just what this specific person needs to start the process of change. So if that person needed to read that or see that or be confronted with that idea, and that makes them question, maybe there's something else going on here. And if that's what prompts them to start this process of self-inquiry, of growth, of taking care of their body, of knowing, of understanding themselves, great, it worked. It doesn't have to be right all of the time, but if it worked for that specific person, fantastic.
If a person is in a chronic disease and they know for sure, in my condition, I cannot touch this food, or in my condition, I cannot touch this drink, still they are saying, okay, I'm only living once, I will drink, I will eat. So this is a form of suicidal. So day by day, when you know that this is wrong for you,
Yes.
and you still choose it, it is a form of getting closer to death and getting more far away from the health. Yes. Why do I choose this consciously?
I think we're circling back to what we talked about right at the beginning. It's not a conscious choice. So this reflects and shows just how strong our subconscious drivers are. That we know that this choice may not be healthy, but because we've tried to do something different so many times simply by, okay, I'll do it, oh, it didn't work. Okay, I'll try again, it didn't work. Without the connection to the body, the subconscious mind, the body.
Just by decision.
Exactly, just by willpower. Willpower always caves. No matter how strong we think we are mentally, eventually the stress comes to a point where we collapse. And when we do, we reach for the first thing that we know it'll work, the very thing that we're trying to move away from. So here's someone that might be suffering from chronic disease, and they're reaching for behavioral choices that they're still judging themselves for, that isn't improving their health. First, the absolute first requirement is to realize that even though that choice to eat or drink or reach for that substance that the conscious mind assumes is causing all of these chronic conditions, yes, it may be doing that. But to start with the realization that at some point before this was chronic, when it first started, this was protecting me. This was doing something for me. The reason I reached for this is because it was shielding me and protecting me from a pain or an emotional pain or something that I didn't know how to deal with then. And when it started, it wasn't a problem. It was a solution. When we realize that this behavior from its very origin has been protecting us, it allows us to relate to it in a different way. So instead of constantly judging it and saying, oh, this is horrible, I'm such a bad person for doing this, whatever it may be, to say, thank you. Thank you for protecting me for so long. Thank you. As soon as you say thank you, in fact, why don't you try it? You can, when you say thank you, your body changes. Can you try saying thank you out loud?
Thank you.
How does your body respond?
There is some energy that is
Yes.
going through the body every time you're saying thank you, but genuinely thank you.
Yes, it opens the body. It releases that tension because when we stop judging, it stops the shame and the guilt when we say thank you.
So we have to thank our illness, our trauma, or our mental suffering, emotional suffering, whatever it is, once we have realized it is there. Can anybody start practicing this, or you need to have studied psychology for 10 years, you need to be a yogi, you need to have done meditation for all your life?
Well, this is a journey that everyone is starting at different points. At any point, all it requires is curiosity and choice. If we decide that, again, this isn't something that you can force someone into, Because what happens when we try to force someone to change?
Pushing back.
Exactly. So we know what we're up against. We're up against the nervous system that if I try to give you advice, if I try to change your mind, what will happen?
Blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. How many people in this person's life have tried to change them?
Oh,
Exactly. So here comes another person trying to change me. That's not the stance that I have when I work with clients. That's not the stance I have when I work with myself or anyone around me, because I know that it doesn't work. So all I can do is live by example, get curious when you hear certain things, and maybe even you don't play into the drama, you might challenge them playfully. But the bottom line is, if there's a resistance, you're not getting anywhere. But if there's an openness, so as soon as there's curiosity, maybe there is a different path. Maybe someone watching this show says, well, maybe I don't, because I'm not trying to convince anyone. Maybe they're hearing some of this stuff, they start getting curious. And as soon as they realize there's a choice, that is the beginning. That's the spark. And we can nurture that spark by learning slowly how to connect to the body.
so I understand that information without practice is totally zero.
Absolutely. Because if I asked you, would you like to be more responsive, patient, accepting of the things around you?
Oh, of course.
Of course.
Are you willing to make some
Yes.
change and make some changes?
Yeah.
I'm kind of busy. Let's see, maybe
Exactly.
next month.
Exactly. And this is where the practice of stillness comes into play, because there's a lot of words to describe stillness or the process of becoming still. Observing, witnessing, surrendering, allowing, accepting. All these different words that we've talked about, that we value, that we think are important qualities to have in life. They're just words until we actually practice being still. Because when we practice stillness, we are cultivating those qualities. And so it's more than just talk. The first step is, why am I doing that? To get curious. If we start asking why, then we can start seeing, and the mind starts saying, maybe I want it to be different.
Why do we get addicted to social media?
Well, think about the dopamine hits, right? So it becomes addictive to expect a reward. Every time we seek, we're looking for something, and it becomes this, it's now been labeled doom scrolling. But a few years ago, when I was trying to disconnect and learning how to disconnect from the phone, I just call it the search for nothing, because we're not going to get anything. We're just searching for something, but it doesn't come. It's
exactly.
the endless search for nothing. Yeah.
So this gesture, for example, becomes a habit,
Yes.
just like this gesture is a habit for the smoker, this one for the drinker, and so on.
And for me, it was the process of becoming curious about, well, why am I doing that? Oh, it's because there's this experience of boredom that nothing's happening, and my mind is not comfortable not being stimulated. So then, can I practice being still in the moment that my mind is craving stimulation? And if I get comfortable with that, all of a sudden that urge to seek stimulation, it begins to soften. It begins to get less intense, and I'm more able to stay with it. Because I can just, okay, there it is. I've practiced being still, there it is. And in a few moments, the body settles. Okay. And then the first thing that the mind says is, was that it? Was that really all that I was avoiding? Because that tends to be what happens. That the mind is so fearful of this experience, but when it actually goes there, yes, there's a little discomfort. Yes, it's uncomfortable to stay with our temptations from time to time. But after it's wrapped up, after the temptation softens, after the nervous system and the body has processed this experience and it settles, the mind usually says, what was all the fuss about? What?
So this is why people tend to refuse or to mock the simple techniques. The mind expects that for a big change, you need big challenges and you need big, complicated techniques.
Yes, we need
It's the same
technology.
thing.
Yes, we need technology hooked up to us. We need the most recent app. We need all these things surround us to create change.
We need
Absolutely
pills,
not.
so it is more easy for the mind to understand, to process a help, a change for the heart if you are connected to a machine, than to use some breathing techniques, simple breathing techniques.
And there's a very simple explanation as to why. Because the two most uncomfortable states for the mind to experience are uncertainty and silence and unknown, right? The mind wants to control. That's its job. It wants to analyze. It wants to
keep you
label.
alive.
Yes, that's the mind's job. So again, I'm not demonizing the mind. The mind is just doing its job. For the mind to realize, because the mind cannot feel. The mind cannot do the body's work. So for the mind to say, what do you mean I don't have to do anything? Because the answer is do nothing. Do nothing, be still. Just do absolutely nothing and feel.
The most difficult task of the day.
Because the mind can't do it. So the mind's like, what do you mean? I need to control this situation. And if you're asking me to step aside and not do something, no way. I want that technology, I want that thing, I want that pill, because I'm in control now and I'm choosing.
But I remember, for example, when I was in kindergarten and the teacher was seeing us, I don't know, staring the walls, they were asking, what are you thinking about? And you as a 4 or 5-year-old kid would say, nothing.
Yeah.
And the teacher would say, no, only dumb people are thinking of nothing. You need constantly to think of something. So this entered my mind, and I found out, I don't know, 30 years later, I think, that the stillness of the mind is the key. So we have been trained otherwise.
Yes, well, it actually reveals two things. Firstly, it reveals that as children, this is why children are more present. They can play with anything. They can engage with their life fully. And it also illustrates how powerful the conditioning from the external world is to disconnect the child from their senses, from their engagement with the present moment. And all of a sudden they do start thinking, and then they start overthinking. And then we have an epidemic of worldwide global mental health challenges with teenagers who are living in their minds and don't know and have not been taught how to come out of that pattern and simply be back in their body, living their life, engaging with their life and their relationships through their senses, through their body.
What's the mental and emotional climate of a person based on the body shape?
The body never lies, right? So the body is always telling the truth. And in fact, to me, I used to, I was a personal trainer when I first started my career of helping people, and I used to sit on the beach and I would watch people run. And it was amusing because I would watch the dynamics, the biodynamics of how their body was moving. And I was like, okay, I was almost analyzing how they were working out, what they were doing. And I could imagine, I could see the way they were treating their body outside of this moment for their body to look and move in the way that it was. And I think the same is true when I can look at a body now and I get curious. I wonder, you might see the way they might be relating to themselves by their posture. You might see the distribution of how their body looks. You might be able to determine and guess, at least have a guess at what their lifestyle is like. So yes, I don't think the body can hide anything. We might attempt to through the different things that we might wear or do, but even surgeries or whatever it may be. But the body is always revealing to us how we're treating it, how we're relating to it. And one of the quotes that comes to mind in relation to this is, some of the people watching this may believe that taking care of the body, taking care of myself and focusing on myself, it's a very selfish thing to do. You shouldn't be doing that because you have other responsibilities. And for me, the quote that comes to mind is that self-care is about giving the best of you, not what's left of you. So when we take care of ourselves, we give ourselves more fuel to be able to give to others. So for me, it's a very selfless act to go and meditate. It's a very selfless act to have a good night of sleep because I wake up and I'm able to be present with my son who needs that attention, to be present and connected with my wife who knows immediately, you're not being present. Yeah, you're right, I'm not. And to notice, to have those barometers. I remember early on, again, we talked about the journey of the body that might be superficial or hedonistic. For me, the journey into the body has been nothing but has been a progressively deeper spiritual journey, right? Whereas when we start this journey of transformation, of growth, our initial intentions might be superficial. I want a six-pack, I want this, I want that. And that was the world that I lived in for so long. The reason I left that world was because my curiosities got deeper around anxiety, depression, mental health, and real meaning in life. So for me, the barometers for my own well-being stopped being physical variables, and they started being, if there's stress and tension in my relationships, I'm not taking care of myself. And so then the relationship with my mother, my wife, my son, my clients, my work, myself, when that started getting tense, or I would find that I would get quick-tempered or angry, okay, I'm not taking care of myself. So I need to take a step back, give my body what it needs, and then I can re-engage, and all of a sudden there's peace again. It had nothing to do with them. It's not their fault. If there's If there's nothing more powerful about this journey of connecting to ourselves, to our body, is that we take full responsibility for the quality of our life experience. If things are not going our way, the only thing that we can control is this. We can't control that stuff out there. So if we start there, we might be able to navigate our external world with more ease because we're taking responsibility for ourselves, for our decisions, for everything.
Taking care of myself, taking care of my body, my mind, my spirit,
Yes.
my emotions, my disease, my everything will make me a more relational person, will improve the relationship that I have with myself, that I have with the spouse, that I have with the parents, and with all the society.
Absolutely, because what happens in an argument when there's stress and tension in relationships, we have two nervous systems, two bodies, two people that are reacting to each other. So they're both living in their minds. So I'm not engaging with you, I'm engaging with my thought of you, and I'm reacting to something happening in my body. So I'm not actually seeing you or being with you. As soon as one of those people in the relationship, as soon as one person is pausing and, ooh, that's triggering, I'm not going to react to it, I can feel that, and they're not living in their mind and they're engaging with the person, actually, this is what's happening for me, there's a state of anger. What's happening in you that's causing this emotion to be the surface? What's the story you're telling yourself that's
what is the button you are pushing?
Yes, exactly.
It's like in a tennis game.
Exactly.
If I leave the ball drop, there's no game.
Perfect analogy. It takes two people to create an argument. So as soon as one person is doing work on themselves, it already begins to change the dynamics of the relationship. If both people are focusing and doing work on themselves, that creates magic. So I do think that when two people in a relationship begin working on themselves and begin to take responsibility for their own reactions, because that's the only thing they can control. In fact, when I work with a couple, I say, okay, everything is your responsibility and your fault. And everything is your responsibility and your fault. And I tell them both the same message because that's the truth. They can only focus and take responsibility for the full extent of what is happening to them.
And to the change that they can do only on themselves.
Absolutely correct. And then that's what creates magic.
Dr. Luke Sniewski or Sniewski, whatever we want to pronounce it, I understand it is totally correct. Thank you very much for this program, Somawise, for this book, and for the presence here in Romania and in our show.